Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of Real Good Movies, College TV's movie and pop culture show. I'm Will Beeman, the production manager for CTV, here once again to host. I'm really looking forward to the topics that we have at hand and discussing with our panelists. So grab your ticket, buy your popcorn, and take a seat. The show is about to begin.
Gosh, I love movies.
Joining me this semester for Real Good Movies, we have two new student panelists, and I'm really excited to introduce them and have them give a little information about themselves. And joining us all the way from Ivy Tech is Des. Des, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for joining us this semester for Real Good Movies. Why don't you tell everyone who is watching the show a little info about you and like what your favorite movies are?
Okay, so I'm Des. I'm an Ivy Tech student, actually taking a PFW class this semester and then transferring to PFW next year. Some of my favorite movies, I love horror movies. Those are like probably my favorite ones. I love thrillers too, which I guess could sometimes be a subset. I don't know. Horror, thriller. I like a good historical piece too. Okay. Like any sort of like period piece where they really get a good like representation of that time period. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are some of my favorite movies.
Okay, off the top of your head, what's your favorite movie ever?
Scream.
Scream?
Yeah,
okay.
I watch it at least once a year, I think, maybe.
Okay, perfect. And also joining us to round out our panel is someone that you may know from other shows that we filmed on College TV, like Campus Connections, is the lovely Zed. Zed, thank you for joining us on Real Good Movies now.
Thank you for having me.
How about you introduce yourself a little bit more beyond your hosting duties you've done before?
For sure, yeah. I am a junior at Purdue Fort Wayne, and I'm just a big movie fan. You know, it's been like something. It's been around my house since I was like a really, really little kid, so it's just been like the main thing I've consumed media-wise since I was as young as I can remember.
Okay, so what's your favorite movie?
It's a loaded question.
It is.
I think you would agree with that, but like off the top, it's got to be Scott Pilgrim versus the World. That's a pretty high-ranking pick for me. It's going to be either that or Baby Driver. It's cheating, giving two, but yeah, I mean.
So a big Edgar Wright guy, I take
Edgar Wright, absolutely. Yeah. Tarantino as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I'm excited to dive into our main topic of the episode, which is the movie Barbarian, which is in theaters right now. But before we get to that, let's kind of talk about 2022 at the movies in general and discuss the top movies in the box office right now. We'll pull up the graphic right now of the movies. Number one, which is quite surprising to me at least, is the success that Top Gun Maverick has had, which has pulled in domestically $710 million and internationally is well past $1 billion. Coming in at second is Doctor Strange, and that's about $411 million. So you can already see just how much Top Gun has been crushing it, where it's about $300 million ahead of second place. Jurassic World Dominion, I wish we could have done an episode on that terrible movie, but that's still hauled in $376 million. The Batman, which came out earlier this year when people weren't really returning to theaters yet, still was able to haul in an impressive $365 million and hold off the power of the Minions and Rise of Gru at $343 million. So that's the top five so far. There are some movies that are more recently released that are really working their way up that train. Like Nope, for example, is doing very well successfully financially. Bullet Train with Brad Pitt. The Bad Guys, which was an animated film from Sony. The Black Phone, which is a horror film that is now available on streaming. And The Woman King, which has recently released from Sony Pictures. There is one big shocking thing to me that I want to discuss about the whole top five, and you can kind of give your opinion too, is the stunning box office and critical failure of the movie Lightyear by Pixar. I think that it was very mind-blowing to me, and I saw the movie and thought it was very good, about how that was not even able to accomplish $100 million its opening weekend. Just an abysmal critical failure for Pixar, which is something you do not tie with that studio, who are known for 30 plus countless family hits at this point. And it's been a pretty solid year for animation too. Like DC Super Pets and Minions and The Bad Guys, like I had said, are all doing pretty well commercially. So what do you guys, we'll start with Zed first, think of like the overall 2022 at the box office so far and the performance of Lightyear?
With the box office in general, I mean, it's been... Thankfully, we do have movies coming out again, which I'm really happy about. The Batman came out earlier this year. That was mind-blowing. The fact that it's still number 4, I believe, on the chart, it says a lot. It's one of the best movies of the year. Top Gun Maverick, again, taking the lead. Like, nostalgia's powerful. It's a really powerful tool. And, like, on top of that, it was just a very well-made movie. And I'm just glad people are back in theaters and that things are actually moving again in the industry. But as for Lightyear, it's... again, baffling. Like, I think the main thing is people were just confused because it's like, wait, it's about what? It's not the toy. It's the toy that it's the guy that the toy is based on in the fictional universe, and they're going to real space, and then there's a toy cat, and it's like everyone's a little confused about it, and I understand that, but it's like it was still a very, very sweet. It's a Pixar movie, you know. They hit all their marks, and it's just disappointing to see. I can't really put a finger on why it just went under the radar, basically.
Yeah. Des, how about you? What do you think about the movie so far this year?
I think, well, like Zed said, I'm glad that people are going back to the movies and everything. But with Lightyear, I don't know why I didn't know that it was so bad. Like, or at least the reception of it was so bad on the financial end of it. I guess with the nostalgia thing, that makes sense, but also the confusing part of, yeah, every single comment section that I saw about the movie, so many people were confused. Like, that was the constant thread that I saw, was people were confused about what was happening, like what was it supposed to be and everything. And maybe if this was made a while ago, it would have still had the, like, been able to run off of the, what was it, Toy Story 4 that had come out. But I don't know, I think maybe the nostalgia train for that just wasn't as good as what they hoped. And then also on top of that, compounded with the confusion of the plot itself, probably just didn't help people wanting to go see it and stuff. Because I mean, I haven't seen it, but I love Toy Story, so maybe I'm one of the people that like did fail them. As like someone who loves Toy Story and all of the movies, I didn't go see it because I just didn't, it wasn't appealing to me as far as like, oh, okay, it's not the Toy Story movie that like we like with all the characters and everything. It's just a subset of that. So I guess it didn't work for me, and maybe obviously for a lot of other people.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, at least, with Lightyear, why it underperformed so well is I think the general audience just got conditioned to seeing Pixar movies for quote-unquote free, because Onward and Soul and Turning Red were all straight to Disney Plus films. So I think they got kind of conditioned and used to that, so to them there wasn't the incentive to go see it in theaters because they knew it would be on Disney Plus soon enough, which it now is. So if you did not support it in theaters, at least go watch it because it's a great movie.
Very good.
Or at least I thought it was a great movie.
It's wholesome. It's an animated movie. Like,
Yeah.
you can't not enjoy it.
I mean, Pixar doesn't really, even when Pixar has a quote-unquote bad movie, it's still a great movie. So that's just a little bit about the 2022 box office so far. As the episodes go on, now that we're back in our 2.0 version, we will definitely focus on the monthly box office releases. So this will lead us to the next segment in the show, which is the real recommendations. And this is where each of us give one or two films that we've recently seen that we want to recommend to everybody to go check out and kind of broaden your film horizons. And I will go last like I always do, and we'll kick it over here to Des. And Des, what are your recommendations for our viewers?
Okay, so I have two. One that has a little asterisk to it, so I guess I'll get to. The first one is I did want to recommend Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I changed that from my initial one I was going to recommend. just because it was a while since I'd seen it. I was thinking of ones I'd seen more recently, but that's still a recent movie. And I like that one more than a lot of the other recent ones I've seen. So that one I'll recommend. It's a fun kind of like tongue-in-cheek Gen Z humor sort of movie. It has a lot of things that that you would expect in like a murder mystery, but it's got a good twist, and I liked it, and it was very funny from what I understood in the tone. Like, you have to go into it with the right tone. If you want to go into it with like a different mindset, you're not going to like it. But if you go in with the right idea, and I feel like the movie sets the tone pretty well, so you're not going to be confused by it once you get into it, but you just got to go along for the ride on that one.
Okay. And what's the second film?
The second one is Do Revenge. I was really excited to see that on Netflix. So it isn't a theater movie, but it was a Netflix original movie. And I was super excited. I really liked it. I could see how some people might not, and I've seen some mixed reviews on it. But I'd like to see more reviews as more people see it, because it just came out, I think on Monday, like earlier this week sometime. But that one's like a nice mix of like 90s, 2000s, like teen movies mixed with like made for Gen Z though. They have a lot of like references and things that they talk about are more relevant, but it's like Clueless aesthetic mixed with Cruel Intentions and Mean Girls. It's like very like if you watch it, you'll understand what I mean by like all of that mixed together. But it was really fun, really great to watch. The aesthetics of it are amazing. I loved the whole color scheme of every single set and wardrobe, and everything was very meticulous. You can tell they put a lot of time and effort into that and making color schemes work throughout the whole movie. And I really appreciate it, and I thought it was really nice.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. Those are two great recommendations. Zed, how about you give us your recommendations? Because I think you wanted to start off a little unique to really give the viewers an insight on how you think.
Yeah, so we have, obviously the title of the show is Real Good Movies, but I kind of want to start off with a show, you know? It's something that I've felt very strongly for, and I think it's been slept on a little bit. It's gotten its appreciation for its target demographic, like it hit the mark, but I think it could be appreciated by so many more people for what it is, and that is FX's The Bear on Hulu. It's one season. It came out earlier this year in March, and as of right now, they've already greenlit a second season, so you have that to look forward to. But just to give you a little bit of context, it's you have this guy who is played by Jeremy Allen White, Lip Gallagher from Shameless, if we have fans of the show. He's playing a guy named Carmen, who's a top chef in basically the whole world, and some family of tragedy occurs, and he's forced to come back home and take over the family business, which is a restaurant, funny enough. And it just kind of chronicles him making it work and turning everything around, and just the start of that journey. And it's really, really amassed a very strong following as of now, and I'm just really looking forward to season 2, and I think a lot of people might enjoy it as well. That's my first pick, but my second pick is Hustle with Adam Sandler on Netflix. That is, again, a movie that I think kind of went under the radar a little bit. I think it was definitely more noticed than the other, but it's one of those perfect sports movies. You know, I love me a good underdog story. I love the tradition of Philadelphia as the sports city. We have Rocky, we have so many just movies that hit home in Philadelphia with sports, and you can add Hustle to the list. It makes you feel good, it keeps you connected, and Adam Sandler's killing it again, in the dramatic roles. You know, like he has his moments of humor, but again, it's definitely not nearly as intense as something like Uncut Gems, but he's locked in, and he definitely makes you feel something, and yeah, it's a great movie. I recommend you could check it out if you have the chance and if you're into sports. Okay,
cool, awesome. My recommendations that I'd like to give is starting off with Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, the A24 family comedy. Very heartwarming movie, very funny, and all of the people that worked on the original short film have come back to work on the feature-length film. It's available on VOD now. I'm not sure if it's got a Blu-ray release yet, but that's definitely one to check out if you can. My second movie that I would recommend would be Emily the Criminal, which is Aubrey Plaza's like real first foray into a dramatic role, and it's a little different to see her in a role where she doesn't make a joke one time even in that movie. But I'm a sucker for thrillers that are real short and concise in under 2 hours, and this was like, so it was right up my alley. It was basically a movie made for me. But if you like real short, tense thrillers that just don't waste any time getting to the point and are a real quick watch, that would be a good one to do. But that's going to do it for the real recommendation segment of the show. So we can dive right into our spoiler talk on the marquee event of the show, Barbarian, which is eating up the box office charts right now. It's only been in theaters for, I think, 2 weeks now, maybe 3. I can't remember its exact release date.
Yeah.
Yeah. Under the recommendation of Zed and Sydney, our director of the show, I was told to see it knowing as little as possible going in, and I'm glad I did, because every twist and turn along the way really hit me the way that the filmmaker intended. Zach Kreger, who is the writer and director, who comes from a web series, an IFC series that you might know of, The Whitest Kids You Know. So it was really surprising to see that he came up with this film, and I am so excited to start talking about everything that happened in this movie, because it just goes off the rails. So let's give our initial thoughts here before we really dive into some spoiler territory. Zed, what are your quick elevator pitch thoughts on Barbarian?
Like, I don't even know where to start, but right out the gate, I can tell you that for me, when it comes to horror, I rarely think when you try to get comedy in there that it works, but Barbarian hits it every time. You are laughing when you're meant to be laughing. You are on the edge of your seat when you're meant to be on the edge of your seat, and you're screaming when you're meant to be screaming. It is such a good scare, and it's perfect for the season, and yeah, that's the elevator pitch.
Right. Des, how about you?
I would say that, going into this movie with as little knowledge about it as possible is the best way to watch it. I wasn't even sure of the marketing of it when it was one of those movies I forgot that I heard about, and I think it was intentional, but just going in with as little as you know about it, so that way you can just be along for the ride. You just have to just sit back and enjoy the ride of that movie, because otherwise you may not like it, but going into it unknown is the best way.
Yeah, really the best way I can describe it is just a wild ride, because there's so many tone shifts, there's so many interesting direction choices that I'm gonna kind of dive us into a little bit more. So let's start with the opening. I don't know, I guess Act 1 is the way to talk about it, where our two leads of the movie, one is a woman who is in Detroit for a job interview, and she shows up to this Airbnb, and there's already a man there who it's been accidentally double booked, and they kind of got this awkward thing, how would you handle that situation in real life? I'd probably be just as awkward, where he tries to be friendly about it, and she's nice, but also a little untrusting of how things would go, understandably so. And so after they kind of stay up for a while, because she wants the sheets to be washed before he gives her the bed, we wake up at some point in the middle of the night, and her bedroom door is wide open and unlocked, and she can see right out to the man on the couch sleeping. When this point hit in the movie, that's when I was like, oh man, we're not wasting any time getting right into this. But it's kind of a curveball, and she wakes up in the morning, everything's fine, but the gentleman is gone doing his own little thing, and she does and carries out her job interview. But then she comes back and finds that the basement door is open. That was not open before, so she does some exploring and finds an interesting trap door area.
A secret door.
Yeah, a secret door. And it was a great play on that trope too, where she's staring down the hallway and the camera's kind of panning and she just says nope. And I was like, it's always a first instinct in a horror film for someone to go in. And when the gentleman comes back and she's like, we gotta go, there's some messed up stuff in this hallway. He goes to investigate by himself and then goes missing. So Zed, how about you kind of carry from here? What ends up happening from this moment?
So he disappears down the dark hall, and naturally she's like, I feel like we have to backtrack a little bit. She ended up going down there herself for a moment, and she found, we're getting into the spoiler talk now. Yeah, okay, cool.
The spoilers are up.
Spoiler warning.
Yeah.
We follow her as she like very slowly, cautiously makes her way into this pitch black room. So what she does is she sets up like a mirror, and it's very clever. She's a smart individual, which is very great to see as a member of the audience. But she makes her way down to the end of this hallway, this decrepit, barely stone structure. I don't even know what to describe it as, but at the end of it,
it's like a mine shaft.
Exactly, it's a mine shaft. And then at the end of it, there's a door, and she opens it, and it's like a dungeon, and there's a bucket that looks super nasty, and then there's a bed, and there's a bloody handprint on the wall. And she's like, nope, for the second time, and gets the hell out. And when she's up, that's eventually when he comes, and he's like, yeah, I'll check it out, don't worry about it. She has reason to worry, because he disappears, and she ends up like following him all the way down, and after she checks that room, she goes down for the second time. There's a secret door behind the secret door, and that is just a stairway into like the darkness. There's nothing down there, but there's something down there because she follows him. She hears him yelling, "Help me!" And it's like, no, we should just leave him and get out. But I mean, got to.
Right, she only knows him for a night at this point. I don't understand why.
I would like to point out the actor for the guy is Bill Skarsgård, and there's a throwaway line where he's like, "What do I look like, a monster?" And I love that moment so much. But yeah, so she follows him down, just the voice, and she's like in pitch black. So she's trying to like feel her way around. She's looking. She eventually finds like cages, like human-sized cages, or maybe a large dog. I don't know, whatever. And eventually she does find him, and he looks worse for wear, and what ends up happening is he's just like, you can't go, like, she's like, we gotta get out of here, we gotta go. It's like, no, they're that way, it's that way. And she's like, what is that way? We gotta get the hell out. They don't get out. What we thought, I personally thought the whole movie would take place in that night. So when we woke up the next day, I was like, oh, okay. While they're in the shaft, they are assaulted by a mammoth-sized thing, which at the time we don't know what it is. So we'll get into that. Right. I'm not going to say it just yet. But it has a breast out, and it has very long claw-like hands, and it bashes Bill Skarsgård's head into the wall in some amazing, what I'm pretty sure is practical effects. There's got to be
there's definitely
CG
some good
in there.
Visual effects.
But no, it was incredible, and then it's just cut to black, and like,
right. Well, before we get to that point though, where it does cut to black, what was your thinking, Des? Like, while this whole first act of this film, like, what was your mood? How was your reaction about this? Because I think what this part of the film does is it does an extremely good job of creating the tension.
For sure.
And it's all just a constant slight tugging on that tension rope until we get to the point where it snaps, where the creature comes out and just brutally murders Bill Skarsgård. But like, what do you think about this whole part? Like, does it do a good job of setting up this atmosphere we're in?
Oh, absolutely. I like that whole first part. There's no comedy in that first act. As like you mentioned, there's like funny parts of this movie. It's not in that first act. The first act is pure like tension, suspense. Like, you're trying to figure out as the audience, you're identifying with the Tess character, the girl that shows up. So you're trying to figure out what this guy's deal is. You're focused, like, honed in on Bill Skarsgård's character. Like, is he, because she's sketched out. She like goes and finds his wallet at one point, takes a picture of his like ID just to like, which is smart, like, and something happens, she has like that. So the whole time you're trying to figure out if he's trustworthy, what his deal is. Like, he ends up relating to her in a way where he's like knows of some obscure film that she's interviewing, the job interview. is for a filmmaker who made this obscure film that he has somehow seen. So you're like sketched out. You're like, okay, he's trying to relate to her.
How have you seen this?
Yeah,
This is
how have
so-
you seen this? He's trying to relate to her. He's trying to pull down her guard, and he does. They have a nice heart-to-heart talk during that night. They become sort of friends. So you're like, no, don't be friends with this guy. There's something weird. And Zed and I talked before about an interaction they had where he's has this bottle of wine out, and he's stumbling over his words, trying to not be awkward, and she's kind of okay, because he's literally pointing out the fact that I'll open this bottle of wine in front of you, so I'm not trying to be weird. I'm not
doing anything to the bottle.
Nefarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when he gets killed at the end of this first act, your mind is reeling because you're trying to figure out what's happening now. Because even the marketing for this whole movie is just this beginning part. You realize towards the middle, that's what I realized, oh, what is happening now? Because you think this whole movie is going to take place in that one evening. What's going on between these two? And the tension that it builds is intense. There's literally heartbeat sounds when she's going down the tunnel and all this stuff. So it's just the whole first act is tension building.
Yeah, and I think what it also does too, which makes every twist that we're going to get to along the way hit harder, is this film does an incredible job of being anti-modern horror trope. Because I think part of why it's so tense is we're waiting for that jump scare to happen. So every time a door slightly opens or she's peeking over a corner slowly, we're waiting for that boo moment, and it doesn't deliver that. So that way, when we get our first glimpse at that monster, it's effective horror because not only is it grotesque looking, but it's also a very violent first murder that we see. And her not going down the hallway at first without being able to light it up first, and them not having a forced romantic interaction or anything like that. They both get to stay as individuals, but I think that also lends why we're so suspicious of him, because that whole time you're he's got to be the one behind this, and that's why it worked out the way that it did, because he used a different app to book it and everything, and we know him as the clown from It. So you just automatically assume, and that's what this movie does well on, is it plays with your assumptions. So now let's get to the second part here, which is really the first twist that hits, because when it does that cut to black and it kicks back up, I thought we were in a different movie and the projector aired out.
I thought it was a short film. I was just
I thought it was a different movie too. I was just completely
the tonal shift
happening?
where we cut to Justin Long's character, who is an actor in Hollywood, driving down the highway, celebrating this new show that he has coming out, and then receiving the call that one of the actresses is going to be revealing this bombshell report with the Hollywood Reporter and accuse him of sexual assault. And Justin Long plays this unlikable actor so well, it almost makes you think maybe he's become an unlikable human, but that's not true, because Justin Long's great.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He's always great in these kind of horror type roles too. So his life just instantly starts rolling down into shambles, and it's just his reaction is exactly how you would think someone in this situation would be to react. But let's start with you, Des. What did you think of just the complete tonal 180 that we get after that cut to black up to, let's just say, the part where he meets his financial advisor to that point? What do you think about the tone shift here? Do you think it delivered as well, or did it catch you off guard like it did with me, or how did that make you feel at all?
I think it did both, which I think was intentional. I think it was definitely supposed to confuse the audience, because it does. It's totally out of nowhere. You go from this dark, dingy basement, this horrific death scene, all this stuff, to bright, sunny California. He's driving, he's singing this song, he's acting so silly, and then they have this B plot of he is being called by a manager or something on the phone in his car, and he's getting this news about this horrible story that's coming out, accusing him of all this stuff. So it's just, I think it's funny because my mind was still trying to figure out what just happened.
For
So
sure.
like while this was happening, I was laughing, but it was also like, it gives you a little bit of a breather almost to try and readjust what's going on, like, and to digest what just happened and try to figure out the next part. And I think the tonal shift is great because it is funny, like how Justin Long plays his character, and you can tell his personality very well from the delivery and everything, and how he's acting and stuff. So that whole part is not tense, it's confusing and funny, and I think it was in a good spot for this movie to shift over to that part. Right. They did it very well. And Zed, how you said it, like horror and comedy, it can be difficult, and I think they did a pretty good job of switching over in tone with that.
I think this part is really where it shows that the director and the writer came from Whitest Kids You Know.
I know what that web
because
series is.
his satire really shines through on this, on how actors handle this situation. So we do find out that Justin Long's character is technically the owner of the house that this all happened in. Right. And since he's got to afford legal fees now, he's got to go back to Detroit to check out the house so he can sell it. I think it's hilarious when he gets to the house, though, and like he sees their luggage. His first instinct is, "Oh, I got squatters." And then after the management company's like, "I don't think anyone's there," and he's like, "Well, I'm staring at suitcases." And then he finds the secret door. Right. And his first instinct is to measure the square footage for his resale value. And it's just a complete polar opposite, because with our first set of characters, it's a very tense, scary scene. With him, it's him fumbling with the tape measure and a flashlight to measure these rooms out. And he's like making notes in his phone. And
moving the bed, pushing the bucket to the side, ignoring the bloody handprint.
He has no problem with what's happening there. And then he goes down the same little path. And I think a very interesting perspective from a director choice here, and this is what I'll toss around to see how you guys do, is once Justin Long's character comes into the fold here as one of the mains in this movie, they do a really interesting perspective shift with the cinematography, where they often go first person through him with like a fisheye lens. And I think it's because once he gets into panic mode, it kind of gives like that I'm in a rush and I'm only out for myself kind of fight or flight mode that leads to how his character interacts down to the end of the film. So like, what do you think about these moments where when he's encountering the monster in the basement, like when he's holding the flashlight, holding the knife, or when he finds that empty room with just the TV with the video on how to breastfeed a baby, and then when he first sees the monster rush at him, and then he turns around and runs and gets caught into that little trap. Like
hole in the ground, basically.
What kind of mood does that put you in when you see those like fisheye first-person perspectives?
I think it just does a great job of, like, again, continuing to build that tension, because it puts you again in his shoes, and you're seeing like, I kind of looked at those shots as like the fight or flight shots. You know what I'm saying? Because that's him in that moment, like, okay, how am I going to react to this? And it's really funny because he really does kind of treat it super nonchalant up until the moment that like he sees the beast, right? Because even he sees the room where it's like a bunch of stuff strewn about the ground, and then you have the mother instructional breastfeeding video going, and he's just like, whatever. Ends up going back upstairs, Googles, can you include basement square footage or whatever. But then, when he finds the beast and he's carrying the knife, ends up fumbling the knife, and it's just like, I don't know. I think it does a great job of, like, again, continuing to build that tension, but it produces a little bit of levity, which, again, I feel adds to the tension later on down the road. But again, it sets up our next main character, I guess, which is his first act.
Right. So, like, what it does when he falls into that trap, though, is he encounters Tess from the first act. So, sigh of relief, she's still alive. Right. She's been trapped in this trap. And that's when she finds out that the creature is fine as long as you make her think that you're her baby. And then she sticks that like grotesque bottle of milk through the drain
with hair on the top of it.
And Tessa's like, you have to drink it. And she's like, So she drinks some of it, and Justin Long's character is
refuses.
like, I am not putting that anywhere near me. And she's like, trust me, you're going to want to drink that, and you're going to want to stay calm. And then he keeps refusing, so she rips open the grate or whatever, pulls Justin Long out, brings him back to that room with the TV in it, and starts trying to breastfeed Justin Long, which was like probably the most disturbing sequence of the film for me, to be honest, just because there's
a couple
I
of them.
can't describe visually how grotesque they make I guess the barbarian is what you'd call the creature.
I think she's labeled as the mother
The
at
mother?
the end.
Okay.
Yeah,
She's
which is
credited
just
as.
like,
But like, talk about your skin crawling on this kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
So once this happens, like Justin Long is on the same page as Tess, where he's like, we both need to get out of here. So this is when his like hero arc starts. But Tess tries to make a run for it and get out of there so she can get some help. But no one believes her. So like, how frustrated did that leave you at this point in the movie, where she's trying to get help and can't get anybody to listen to her?
So frustrated. I was talking to my friend after I watched the movie, and there's a scene where, yeah, she gets out, like she escapes, like through that whole thing where the mother is distracted with Justin Long's character. She escapes. She gets out. Yeah, her keys are inside or whatever, like her ID is inside, but she can she's free, free. But then her immediate thought is that she needs to help Justin Long's character. So she goes to get help to bring back there because she's like, he's stuck in there. He's probably going to die. All this stuff. She doesn't even know him. Like, she has no idea who this guy is, which really like speaks to her character throughout this whole thing of how she's trying to help people the whole time. But then, yeah, she has an encounter with the police. She goes to a gas station. She calls the police. They show up. Meanwhile, she was there for 2 weeks. I think it was like the person on the phone said it hadn't been rented out for a couple weeks. So she is like dirty. Her hair is a mess. Like, she looks like, yeah, she's been kidnapped, you know. But especially the setting, specifically where they're at.
Detroit.
In Detroit, but also specifically just the neighborhood they're in. Everywhere, when you, especially like at the beginning of the movie when you see the houses, it's all destroyed, abandoned area. And so that's really important because these cops then completely dismiss her. They bring her back to the house because she says, like, this is where this stuff is happening. And they're just like, okay, so you don't have any ID. You're saying that you need to get into this house, but you don't have a key. Like, you're trying to break into this house. Like, we're not going to help you. Like, they pretty much allude to her being on drugs or something. And the way that these, like, we're used to seeing dismissive cops in horror. That's just a trope of, like, the cop that doesn't believe them. But there's something different about these ones where a lot of the times it's like a bumbling cop that's kind of like, oh, you silly little girl, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, these ones are, like, genuinely mean. Like, they have this, like, aura of just, like, truly they don't care about this woman or what's happening to her because they think that she's just homeless or crazy or whatever. And there's just another disturbing level to that rather than having them be the typical dismissive cops. So I don't know. It was very upsetting to watch that scene.
What do you think about up to this point so far?
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to backtrack for a second. When she got back from her job interview, she was chased to the door by a homeless man who she just assumed were in the shady part of Detroit. I mean, yeah, whatever. So she has a whole freak out before going into the basement of calling the cops, like, somebody help, before, I believe his name was Keith, right? The Bill Skarsgård's character?
Yeah.
He, before Keith got back. So I just pointing that out, we saw him at that moment there, because now, yeah, it's like there's nobody believing her, and it's very stressful because clearly there's a problem here. But as of now, with her in the pit, with him in the pit, it's just, I think it's just interesting how, like, even though, yeah, she's been in there for 2 weeks, yeah, she's survived because we've seen how capable and how smart she just is as a character. It's I'm fully losing my train of thought.
So let's fast forward here now,
Yeah.
because we don't need to go minute by minute through
For
the
sure,
film.
for
So
sure.
we've established now that Tess loves helping people.
Right.
She doesn't want to leave anyone behind. So she's going to go back for Justin Long's character. Justin Long Not a great person.
Absolutely not.
Seems willing to be on the same page to get out of this monster, though, or get away from this monster. So when he escapes from the mother after she takes off after Tess, Justin Long keeps going down the other side of the hallway and eventually finds like a bell attached to a string, and he keeps following that hallway down, which leads to a door. And the mother catches up with him, and then she like realizes where he is, and then she backs away and just disappears. And it's the homeless man that you mentioned. He even says she's not the worst part of that house. Yeah. So we do find out through some flashbacks of the original homeowner who back in
more than a flashback, it's almost like a whole
it's almost like
sequence.
it's like a whole sequence where you can tell this guy's not a good dude, and you can tell that he has some kind of murderous motive to his everyday life.
Weird guy.
So Justin Long goes through this bedroom door, and that homeowner that we see is like super old and decrepit, but laying in that bed or whatever. Right. And he finds all these VHS tapes with like women's names on them or whatever, and he's like, "You're a sick person. You're a terrible person. I'm gonna call the cops. They're gonna be all over here." And then he kills himself. The old man does with a gun. So Justin Long has a gun now, and starts backtracking out to leave because he's like, "I'm done with this." And then Tess is coming the opposite direction. And this is like some really good foreshadowing, I think, of what's to come. Is when he turns the corner and she turns the corner, he shoots her.
Yep.
But non-fatally, so she's still alive. And then they get out together from the house finally. That's when they're like, "All right, let's get out of here right now." Yep. And they meet up with the homeless guy at his little camp, and he's like explaining like what happened, where he's like, this guy would kidnap women, have kids with them, and then have kids with the kids. And he's like, and I think the quote that he says is, "When you copy and paste so many times, you get her," referring to the mother. And they were like, "Well, how do we know that we're safe here?" And he's like, "Oh, I've lived here for 15 years. She's never come by." And she busts through the wall
Kool-Aid Man
and
right through.
And just murders him right there.
Rips his arm off, beats him to death with it.
Yeah,
it's
so
amazing.
Des, I want to ask you, because I couldn't decide if I wanted to laugh at this scene, be scared of this scene, or both. So, like, what was your thought when she busts through here and goes barbarian mode, I guess?
I did laugh. So like I said, the comedy and horror that this kind of melds together is interesting because, like we said, the first act is just horror, is just suspense. Then that second part, I guess it wouldn't be the second act, but just that beginning part with Justin Long, he's funny. Like his whole part is pretty comedic. Like there's not like scariness. Like there's some suspense because you don't know what's going to happen to him, but it mostly plays on funny. This is where I think it melds together because it is scary. Like she just busts in and rips his arm off and beats this man that was trying to help them. But I wanted to point out how like it's technically, it sounds graphic, but it's not as gory as the Keith kill at the beginning. So when it's horrific, it is gory and horrific and it's scary. When it's like this part, it is kind of funny, but then also you hear it and it sounds terrible, but it really isn't as gory as you would think it is, especially because like when she's like beating him to death, you don't see that. You see her just like using the arm, but it definitely looks like a fake arm. I mean, not like in a bad way, but just, it's not as horrific as it could be. So I like the scene because it is scary because she found them, but it's funny because of like the moment where you're like, oh no, because as soon as he said, "Well, I've lived here 15 years and she's never," and you know she's gonna go through that wall, and it happened, and it's
that moment has really big Hulk and Loki vibes from the first Avengers. Like that's how that's what that reminded me of. But I think Zed, you might agree with me, where this is going to be the beginning of the catalyst here, where the parallel characters carry themselves out with Tess, the helpful person, and Justin Long. I can't remember his character. Is it AJ?
Yeah, AJ.
It was,
yeah.
It was one of those,
and AJ, the guy who thinks he's a good person but is only out for himself, where the barbarian chases them up the water tower, and he's like, "Well, I have a way to stop her, but you've got to slow her down. And he pushes Tess off the top.
He yoinks her off the thing. Like,
takes her hair and
yeets her, just shoves her
chucks
because he's looking for himself,
Oh.
looking out for himself.
Yeah.
And then the mother dives after Tess to
in another
to save
weirdly
her.
comedic shot. In my
Yeah, it
opinion.
reminds me of Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah,
saving,
she's just like diving down after. And
yeah,
it's-
saving Gwen from snapping her
Yeah.
spine.
Yeah.
But so at this point, Justin Long's hero moment's done. This is
Yeah.
when we hate him now,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
I mean, even earlier in the movie, because for more than half the movie, we were kind of like, oh, it was just an accusation. We still kind of have that belief that maybe he didn't do what he did. But then he has this bro night out where he kind of confirms it. And by
Yeah.
that point, we're already like, all right, we're sure you're not a great guy. But then
Yeah.
again, when he's with the Tess and the homeless man in the camp before he gets his arm ripped off, he has this moment of like super self-crisis, self-reflection where he's like,
Yeah.
am I a good person? Or am I just who's just done a couple bad things? Or am I really a bad person? And then it's just like, in that moment, you're kind of like, maybe you have a chance
Yeah.
of redeeming yourself, but then he throws her off the water tower, and you're
throws
like,
it
no
right
shot.
off and does not redeem himself.
Absolutely
with this
not.
character thing. But so thankfully, the mother was able to save Tess from passing away.
Somehow,
which
even
is-
though she came down above her, somehow
Right.
ended up below her.
Well,
Yeah, she like
physics
grabbed
aren't
her and
important
flipped.
in a horror film,
yeah.
though. So like, AJ's going down there to kind of help Tess up.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then-
that's not what he's going down there to do. He's going down there to get out. But
right.
he finds
right.
that she's
but
breathing.
he finds that she's still alive, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, you slipped. I
Yeah.
couldn't. I didn't mean to do it that hard." And then the mother wakes up, and it's kind of like what you just said when with the Keith death versus like the homeless man death, a very graphic and brutal killing of AJ here.
Yeah.
Like first popping his
that
eyes like a
made me
gusher,
squirm.
and
Yeah.
Because it was the pus. It was the pus
yeah, there was
coming down
something-
the nose.
Yeah, pus, some stuff
And I
coming out
kind
of
of
the
wonder.
eyes.
I want you to allude on this maybe a little bit if you have some insight on it. Do you think the parallels there are that we're supposed to believe Keith was also not a good person, because the homeless man who was trying to help Tess this whole time had the mild off-screen death, and the two men that we've been focused on had very graphic on-screen deaths. Do you think there's parallels to that, or?
That would be interesting. I didn't see anything else that would like allude to Keith having, I mean, maybe just because we already assigned him that kind of bad role all this time. So seeing that happen wasn't so crazy to us. And then, yeah, but then like AJ is like confirmed a bad person. So then, yeah, having that death, I mean, maybe there is a parallel there. I didn't even think about that,
Yeah.
where, you know, there's just these guys who we've assigned that they are bad, and then having those terrible deaths, and then
I feel like Keith wasn't a bad guy. I feel like the whole point of that first act was to like get that the audience thinking, and it's like convince him that he could be sus, but then make the carpet pull. He's a full on a red herring. I just feel like, because I think there is a line of dialogue between the homeless man and Tess at some point, where he's just like, no, she comes out at night, and like you're lucky she hasn't done anything yet. So I think, again, Keith was a victim of circumstance. And it's just like, because he's so awkward, and I was like in the movie, and I was like looking at the people I was watching it with, and I'm just like, that's me. I'm that awkward. I just don't know when to stop talking, because I'm
Yeah.
just like, he's doing the thing with the wine bottle where he's just like trying to be like, you didn't drink the tea that I made you because you didn't see me make it. Now I'm just trying to open the wine so we can try to relax together. But clearly, like, I'm not doing anything to the bottle. But
Yeah.
clearly that's so sus. Like, but yeah, I think, again, there's definitely a possibility of that parallel being there. But I would like to believe that
I
Keith was a
almost
good
think
guy.
it encourages another viewing to
Oh,
try
absolutely.
and
That movie needs
to
another
try and
viewing.
rewatch Keith's part of the film under more of a microscope to try and see if maybe there's some subtleness that was overlooked on my first viewing. So AJ is dead, and Tess is wounded, and she has the gun now and tells the mother that like she can't go back to the house. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
And like the mother, I think, realizes what's happening and like does the whole like mama baby, and like kisses her fingers and puts it on Tess's forehead, and then Tess takes out the mother, and that's the end. That's how the movie ends. So let's just do our final thoughts now on Barbarian and give our real score about it. Des, you go first. Closing thoughts and rating.
Well, I obviously definitely enjoyed this movie. It is something that doesn't happen often when I watch a horror movie where I'm like, what the heck is happening the whole time, and in a good way, not in a bad way. But I don't know. There's a lot to like look into it. There was like parts of like AJ's character development, I guess. Not even it, and it's weird because he has character development, but not in a way that you would expect because he doesn't become a good person at the end. It's just like a weird character through that he has of like looking out for himself and stuff, but like having that weird blip of like self-reflection where you think it's gonna go that way. I think particularly he did that after seeing, because when he finds the old man, he sees part of the video. He puts in one of the tapes and watches some of what's happening. And what I like about this movie is they allude to that. They don't ever show anything like that. They don't get exploitative like that, which I appreciate.
Because horror movies do tend to cross that line for the sake of crossing it.
Yeah, and they put in that horror and like, you know, understanding that this character is a bad person in that sense without having to do anything, which is nice because some people don't want to see that. But I like that like AJ had seen that and then was yelling at the old man saying he was a terrible person, he was a horrible person, and then he has his self-reflection afterward. He's like, well, maybe I'm a bad person, you know, because even when he's describing his encounter, the sexual assault with a friend, when we find out that he did do this, he's like, well, she just needed some convincing. Like he paints himself as this person who did that, but he's not a bad person. He was like, she needed some convincing. He's like, I didn't say like, hey, here, I'm gonna do this thing to you. So he maybe has that little I don't know. It was a very interesting through line of him like kind of thinking about what he did as an action and trying to maybe think about it a little bit differently in that self-reflection part. And then at the end though, we realize he's always going to look out for himself. He's never going to have that like accountability and things. And I like Tessa's character. She has a nice part at the beginning where she talks about guys and girls, like if she had that Airbnb, she was talking to Keith, if she had it and he came up to the door, she wouldn't have let him in. She would have told him to leave. But then throughout the whole movie, we see like, but you go back and help them. Like you went back and helped Keith, you went back and helped AJ. So you do help these people, even though you say in a scenario you wouldn't.
Right.
Because you say you have to defend yourself, but then you kind of showed that you didn't for a while, but it was interesting. I think I'd give it like a 4 out of 5.
Okay. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, so Barbarian came at a very good time for me. I had seen, I've been in the spooky mood, you know, and I'd seen Orphan 2 the week prior, and it was not what I was looking for. So
Right.
when I came, again, blind, I think all of us saw it with very little information going in. It was such a blast. Every step of the ride was so much fun, and like, the characters' journeys were fun to follow within of themselves, but again, like you guys were referring to, the parallels between Tess and AJ, and then also AJ and the old man, it was just, that's kind of within of itself worth a rewatch, you know? But it just, again, balanced the horror, the comedy, the cinematography throughout was gorgeous. Like I was just surprised at how much of the movie I was just like, wow, this is really pretty shot. It hit its mark all the way through, and I was just, it's spooky season, man. Get out there, watch this. I'm telling you, just go watch it. Reels, it's got to be a 4.5 out of 5, no doubt. It was quite the film.
Yeah. Okay. I think it was really good and it was really well done. And I think what I liked most about it is the movie is almost in a way a better Don't Breathe. If you've seen that film, because like that film also kind of dealt with like the creepy, disturbing homeowner that was like doing bad things, and kind of in a similar way. But this one had the monster element to it, because like it's scarier when it's not a human monster. But I think it was really good. But just being able to kind of tie those parallels with something I've slightly seen before weighed it down a little bit for me, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 as well. But it is one of my favorite films of the year. It's my favorite horror film I've seen so far this year, and that I mean I've seen Scream and X and all of that so far. I haven't seen Pearl yet, But yeah, so it's definitely highly recommended to go and see it. But that's going to do it for this episode of Real Good Movies. I've been your host, Will Beeman. You can find me on Letterboxd at WBeam76. You can find the show on Letterboxd at Real Good Movies, just one word. All of these will be in the lower thirds as well. Zed, how about you tell people where they can find you at?
I am actually making my letterbox as we speak, so that will be in the lower thirds. You can find me there. You can also check me out on Instagram at carpetpilot_77.
And Des, how about you?
You can find me on my letterbox, DesNicole127.
Okay, perfect. And you can find College TV at collegetv.pfw.edu. And if you want to support the theaters to where it will matter and support a local nonprofit, and you're in the Fort Wayne area, please go and support Cinema Center in downtown. Once again, I'm Will Beeman. Thank you.